Hi, everyone. Welcome to Type Talks. Today we have all FP types, the ISFP, INFP, ESFP, and ENFP. And so, Jason, would you like to tell us a bit about you?
Sure. My name's Jason. I'm an ISFP. I live in the middle of the United States. I've been into type study and understanding for a little over a decade. And beyond that, the only thing interesting about me is I've been married about 25 years, have 5 kids, and that's pretty much the highlight of everything that I have to offer.
What?
A slight undersell there.
At least that he's willing to share.
Under promise and over deliver. That's the way I go.
He's just underestimating his aspirational TE. He's like, I'm just going to undersell it. Yeah. And so I'm actually writing an ISFP themed book with Jason. So stay tuned for that. Yeah. And
I look forward to that.
Cool. Yeah. And Leon?
Oh, I'm Leon. I have 0 years of marriage and 0 kids. I know Joyce, and I'm an INFP.
Well, you're worth the 0% of Jason, sadly.
Where can I meet these non-existent kids?
In Canada. With my wife from Canada.
Yeah, and Leon lives on Earth too.
Yes.
Nice.
Fun fact.
I am an Earthling.
That was very convincing.
Well done.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah. So both Leon has a channel called TypeTips, and Jason has a channel called Jason O'Shea. So it will be linked below. They are all shades of amazing. And Brady?
Hi, I'm Brady. I'm an ESFP. I have been on a few of these panels, so you guys probably have seen me around here before. Let's see, interesting. I've only been in typology for a few years, but I just consume it so often that and annoyed Joyce so much that she got me to be part of these panels. And I love this community, so I'm pretty stoked to be here again.
It's nice to have you on, Brady. Yeah.
Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see that. It's like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of the ESFP stereotype. So
Yeah. And me and Brady were writing a comprehensive theory of type together. So we're 170 pages in so far.
Oh, cool. Wow.
Yeah. Lots of editing to be done.
Yeah, a lot of editing.
Yeah. It's going well.
Mm-hmm. And Kyle?
Yeah. Well, what can I say about myself? I'm certified. An accredited personality hacker. So
Nice.
Prepared to be hacked. I do run a relationship profiling and coaching business, and it's kind of together. It's adjacent and together with my wife, who does ABM neuromovement. And together we are Friesen Holistic Wellness. You can visit our website at friesenwellness.com. And so we kind of hit things from different angles. I take more of the cognitive and, speaking approach, and she does a very hands-on movement-based approach to wellness. And it's kind of a cool synergy that we have. But yeah. What else? I've been married for almost 20 years now, and in June will be 20 years. I've got 4 awesome kids. The oldest just got his driver's license, so a little bit of freedom here in the horizon. Since all EPs are apparently fixated on freedom, then I'll have everything I need in life.
Yeah.
What paper are you writing with Joyce?
Paper? No, I just profile together with her.
Yeah, so I'll have Kyle's website linked below. Feel free to check it out. And so, hi, my name is Joyce, and I'm a certified MBTI master practitioner, and I facilitate the instrument in organizations. I also help people on their type discovery process, and I help coach them. And so FPs, What do you feel you all share in common?
Well, technically, we all share FI and a dominant or auxiliary position. So, internally, what we value is valued amongst all four of us.
Angst.
Sometimes.
We kind of can feel like we're oppressed by society, I guess.
Totally.
Like there's like a lot of like boundaries or restrictions, and we just want to do our own thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think life feels very everybody out there, and then me, like me against the world kind of feeling. I think FI has a very self against the world kind of feel to it.
I would say especially for you two on the top.
Yeah.
More so.
Yeah, we can compromise a little bit more.
Right.
Fine.
Yeah.
Sometimes too much.
Yeah, I was going to say, we have our own struggles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, because the ENFP and the ESFP, they have FI and TE in the middle, so they can kind of give or take the me and the group side. They can kind of compromise between those two. Whereas the FI dominant types might feel more of a difference between them and the world.
Mm-hmm.
That might be a bigger rift.
Which,
Yeah.
by the way,
it does
something-
exist.
something that I admire, like my closest friend is an ENFP, and I just admire his, slightly larger balance in that area than I have. And I feel like he cares about people just a tad bit more than I do. He's a little more self-sacrificing than I am. And honestly, that's really not only admirable, but it helps keep me in a better place mentally by being around him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. ESFPs and ENFPs, some of them do have a really uplifting, encouraging, enthusiastic demeanor that can help energize you almost.
When we feel like it.
When we
Yeah. I was going to say, that's kind of the problem with what we've got. Yeah. It's inconsistent, which I think describes us pretty well.
Inconsistent, yeah. When we haven't given too much already.
Yeah.
Yeah, and definitely one of my best friends is an INFP, and I find it so encouraging to see someone that actually does have a keen sense of self and isn't willing to compromise to the degree that there isn't that constant waffling and uncertainty. Now, there is some. I mean, it's just, he describes it as taking years and years and years to mull over something. And then once he's finally got it, and then he has it. And for us, it's like, oh, but the context is always changing. And I don't know.
Yeah.
Or for me, I should speak mainly from my viewpoint there. But
No.
it can be as like, oh, that's right. It is okay to take care of myself, or it is okay to do this thing that I like. Like, why not? And so he's very encouraging that way. It's like, no, why not? And I'm like, yeah, I never thought of these things kind of like,
Yeah.
so, because we're so used to compromising at certain points in our lives, it can be very much like, oh, well, we're only good when we compromise, and then we're bad when we don't. And that message I get from my INFP, it's like, no, you're a human and you have a perspective from yourself, and it's actually okay to do that. And then you actually bring more to the world if you are healthy yourself and you actually care, if you do things you care about. So I think we definitely polish each other quite well. Actually, my one of my other best friends is an ISFP, so it's I like those IFPs for sure. I just need them, right, to keep myself balanced.
Well, so let me just correct me if I got this right. So just like with ESFPs and ENFPs, the FI nature is just more subtle, like in terms of the social selectivity is still very much there, but it's more like under the surface, right? Otherwise, you're like ESFPs, ENFPs tend to be like very friendly and gregarious with a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, part of the difference though, like I would say we also express our emotions a lot more easily. Like from what I gather, you feel them more keenly, or maybe just it's cultivated an awareness of them, but you don't have to express them. And for us, it's kind of like, it's because we are expressing our emotions and our values more, we also get a little bit, it's harder to fly under the radar when it's appropriate to fly under the radar.
Yeah.
I definitely see that. Yeah, for sure.
I think some of that, stronger feeling of, like me against the world sort of a deal, can influence how much I think FI leads in general are willing to put themselves out there and express we may feel really deeply, but I think we always tread very lightly around other people about what we're willing to show or express, because first of all, we want to make sure that what we express is consistent with what we feel. And then I think we're always just a little bit concerned at how the group out there, the blurry mass of humanity is going to come at us if we're vulnerable.
Yeah. And for me, that's absolutely secondary, because it's like, in the moment, it's like I just feel like saying something or doing something because I enjoy doing that, and that's just kind of part of who I am. And then afterwards, I'll be like, oh, crap, and I'll have to kind of figure it out, because I am very guilty of skipping my FI quite often. That's why, Kyle said he's part of the personality hacker profiling. And that, for me, that's a system that's described to me the best, because I really see myself doing that whole SETE thing and then being like, FI will come along and be like, and I'm like, oh.
What Jason said right there just reminds me of that. I think the phrase that fits FI Doms was like, I love you, but it's none of your business.
Right.
Totally.
That's really good.
Yeah. So, but that's interesting. I'm kind of curious about that, like skipping over FI, because I know everyone kind of goes into their dominant tertiary loop, right? So actually, like FI is something that could be skipped over often with ENFPs and ESFPs.
And I find that for me, that often happens when I'm super enthusiastic in the moment about something, or if I'm like trying to sweep too many things under the rug and get into just get things done mode.
Yeah. Push through stuff. Just get her done. Doesn't matter how I'm feeling right now. It doesn't matter if I care. We just get this thing done, and then it'll be fine. And I won't feel bad anymore. Right. And there's an element of truth to that. Absolutely too. So
yeah. So that's pretty interesting, because I imagine for like ESFPs and ENFPs, they say that third function is how you rest, right? But so how you rest is by working.
Yeah, I was going to say rest.
Yeah, rest. I don't.
Because like on my free time, I do things like, I have like a backlog of video games I want to complete. And like, I like to write, I like to do lists, and I have like all sorts of blog projects I never share with anyone because it's just for me. And it's just stuff I like to do. So for me, resting is never just sitting and thinking. It's always like some kind of productivity thing.
Yeah, you're very quick moving, Brady.
Yeah, I never stop. And that can be to my detriment because, there's always a project to be done. There's always something to do. But then I prioritize them in a funky way. So, I forget to pay some bills, or forget to show up to my dentist appointment, or, those kinds of things. Overbook.
Yeah, it's like using TE a lot, but sometimes it malfunctions a little bit and you're like, whoops, I got that priority wrong.
I mean, it is my tertiary function, not my dominant. So it is something that I like and I value it, but I'm not great at it in comparison to, let's say, an ENTJ or an ESTJ or something.
Yeah, and I would say I would differ slightly in that it's not so much about like constant fast-paced buzzing. It can get there in moderation. When I am exploring a new idea, then I can like totally blast over people and they'll have like no clue what's going on because I'm uncovering the depths of the nuance of every new contextual tidbit that's it's just like, what are you talking about? But so get me excited about a topic or how two things connect, and then watch out, right?
Yeah.
In my video games, I have like this much tolerance for first person shooters as a kid, and now I have like none. I don't do like I have played Wolfenstein 3D when I was a teenager, and then I would get like headaches. And so now it's like and for me too, I guess going through my like 7-year long chronic health journey, chronic illness journey, whatever you want to describe that, also helped me slow down and get past some of these TE narratives that were dominating my life. It's still hard, though, to not define myself by what I do. But yeah, it's interesting how that plays a role. So I do find myself being very unproductive on purpose over the last 2 years. I mean, it's kind of whatever. Since I sold my last business, and it's like, okay, I'm going to take some time off from trying to prove that I'm super productive.
Well, good for you, though. I mean, that's not easy to do if you've been in that habit for a long time.
Yeah, but it helps to have stocks in the stock market. That's impossible otherwise. I'd be fixated on it then if I didn't have whatever passive income, right?
Yeah, makes sense. The Tesla idea was a really good idea.
I have more than just Tesla, but yeah, that one was ridiculous.
Yeah, and so the dialogue between Kyle and Brady here showcased some really interesting themes. So ENFPs, something that gets them into the flow state is discussing or chatting about ideas and concepts that they're into, like those, that is the rabbit hole. Whereas typically for the SE dominant types, what gets them into the flow state is doing things, something more experiential. And so if you were to put this into a situation, if like an ENFP and an ESFP were dating, sometimes the dialogue you'll hear between them is like the ENFP might want their ideas to be heard more. They're like, oh, I wish I could explain these ideas and have it not cut off because I have so many ideas to share. Whereas the ESFP is like, why are we always talking? Let's go and do something. let's go hiking or something.
Being married, I'm married to an ENFP, and I don't know what you're talking about, Joyce. That never happens.
that understanding piece is huge. Like, a part of me feels like, oh, if people would just understand me. I mean, now there's still some of that FITE things going on. It's like, know my intentions. But even just like, understand me, and then it'll be okay, right? Mm-hmm. Then everyone will like me if they really understand me. And then with Brady, it's probably more, well, if everybody would hang out and do stuff with me, then they'd realize what an awesome guy I am. And, so it's similar, engage with me, but just on different realms, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. As mentioned at the beginning, the function that all four of these types share is introverted feeling. And what that is checking in with yourself. And like TI and FI are all about checking in with yourself. They just do it in different formats. And so I'm wondering how you go about doing that and what circumstances do you do it? Can you tell when you're doing it? And how does it look like?
For me, it's a lot of processing of all things alone as much as I can be. And so I spend a lot of time alone in my vehicle, and I will actually monologue in my vehicle. So I'm driving around and I'm like expressing my thoughts verbally to nobody. And that sort of helps to burn them in my brain and let me feel through what I'm going through or what my emotions are doing within me, what my thoughts are. And by expressing them verbally when I can, it really helps me to drive them home. But even if I can't express them verbally, I'll have an inner monologue in my head where I'm almost always just saying to myself or to no particular person how I feel about any given thing that's on my mind. And it's a lot of alone time when I can get it. And honestly, I don't have that much trouble getting it. I do get a lot of alone time. And being married to an INFP who also needs her alone time is really great because we understand one another and that need, and neither of us are like freaking out about the fact that the other one needs to be alone. That helps a ton. But yeah, that I think for me, it's just being alone so that I can feel as deeply as possible without interruption, without any SE sensory interruption, and then verbalizing to myself what I'm going through so that I know for sure what I think. That's why I feel like when I get asked a question, I don't really have to spend a lot of time thinking about the answer unless it's a question that is just out of the blue that I would never think about, because I've already processed very deeply how I feel about everything.
I hear a lot of typing.
Yeah, I know. I was like, what is that?
Shoot, am I? Oh, sorry. I have to take notes because as I'm going through, I have like, oh, this is a cool idea. That's a cool idea. This connects. That connects. This is where I contrast. And so I'm trying to type stuff out so I don't forget it all, so that when it's my turn, then I can share like eloquently. Fail.
I do the same, but I use.
That's where the TE drivers, like the TE higher up people, would have noticed, and they're like doing it.
Well, I can't hear what's coming through my audio, right? So
Absolutely no. That wasn't a job. That was just I noticed the differences between TE users.
Joyce, is it like a requirement you're supposed to like date someone of a type that's present here? Because I know it's like Brady, ENFP wife, Jason, INFP. I had an ESFP X.
I know.
I've only dated an ISTP though, and married. That's my only experience with romantic relationships.
You're disqualified. We're gonna kick you out.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The whole deal.
Well, yeah, I could kind of contrast, like, because I see, like, just like kind of what Kyle just mentioned. So if I think about my ESFP X, she is actually much more expressive of her feeling, like what she likes and what she dislikes, right? A lot of these things I kind of keep to myself more. And just like what Kyle says, it allows me to fly under the radar with things. But she's like more like naturally charismatic too. So through that feeling, she's able to like build a bigger network. I see I need to process things very in a very personal way. So like I can't actually share my process because it's like so secret. It's like very FI. Right. Yeah, but like I think like for me, because extrovert sensing is actually very weak for me. Like it's not like a function I use often. So there's a lot of checking in, but not like exactly tied to action. So I have to, it's like as if I have to filter everything I see and hear and everything I process and everything I learn. And it has to like be perfect first, right? There's that need to like, everything has to become congruent and then I could act. That's like naturally the last thing I think about.
Right.
Because I think like ISFP and ESFP, they're more likely like when they have like a better balance between the FI and the SC. So like they kind of between acting and finding what's like congruent within them, and then kind of as a way of searching who they are, figuring out who they are. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I have like a completely different experience, which is I demonstrate my FI by what I'm doing. So if I'm like actually out there doing something, that's me being like, and here's my FI. You know, I'm out playing basketball because I love basketball. I'm at the beach because I love the beach. You know, like it's whatever I value, I do it. You know, like it's, you know, I'm into typology, so I watch typology videos. You know, like it's not complex for me. You know, it makes me sound like a bit of a simpleton, but I mean, that's just how I am.
Yeah, I feel like I have to like write a book on it first. And then maybe I might act on it. Like I'm like, the book is about me playing basketball, but it's not like me actually playing.
Hey, there's a place for both of those things. Yeah.
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 So Leon, I'm wondering if you relate to the metaphor of checking in with like the council of your brain, like to the different parts of you. Do you relate to that metaphor?
The council of my brain.
Yeah. So like the part of you that is, that wants to be a hero, the part of you that wants to, keep your family safe, the part of you that, doesn't really care what anybody else says, the part of you that's like, no, I actually do want to be a positive impact on the world. So there's all of these voices. Right. And then it's like, I don't know. I've heard ISFPs don't relate to that, and INFPs maybe not.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah, it's like this is a mixture of introvert feeling, but also symbolism too through extrovert intuition. It's also like there's different like all these different possible sides to things. So you're very aware, like very very hyper aware of like the different sides of yourself.
So, can I throw out a comment on that, Kyle?
Yeah.
I have an INFP son. He's 22. And he talks about like having these different people or personalities inside of his brain that he like goes through all of their thoughts or their opinions before, he formulates his idea. And when he began to explain that concept to me years ago, I was just like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Like that is, I'm lost. I have no idea. But my INFP wife could understand him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, I believe it. Like, I'm not trying to be judgmental or criticizing. I can't relate, but I believe it,
Yeah.
And that's really fascinating to hear you say that, because it just is along those experiences that I've had that I can't relate to.
Right. And I've heard from ISFPs that for them, instead of like calling a meeting and getting the ideas going, it's almost more like you're just feeling it in your body.
Yeah.
Like there's that tangible directness to it, which makes a lot of sense if you think about tying to the other parts of your
my
of your
emotional
stack.
state. My body tells me. I mean, like, I'm bringing a balance between my physical state and my emotional state, and I can tell when like even today, I was nervous about something earlier today and my stomach was off, and I had to really control my breathing to bring my physical body back in line with my emotional self, because, in a sense, they were in line. They were both in line incorrectly, or they were both in line in anxiety. And I'm like, I can't get one back in line and not the other. Everything is one unit. Like, I've heard, INTPs talk about like feeling like they're just like a mech suit for their brain. You know what I mean? And I'm like, to me, the body and the mind, it's all one unit. There's no separation there.
I can pretend it isn't though, until it bites me, but I can move past it. So that's where my backseat comes into play, right? So my fourth function is introverted sensing. So how do I feel at any given moment? Like, feel as intangible. It's like, does it matter? I'm just doing things. So that's one major difference.
Yeah.
And the other thing, I think the difference between me and Leon is that I have to convene that council in order to pay attention. Whereas like for INFPs, it's just constant, right? Like, it's not like you're trying to consult. It's just, it is happening. Right. I have a tendency to say, okay, who's on board with this idea? And then I want to listen to you because I just want to get to the work, right? I want to sometimes shortcut and get to the work, but there still is this idea generation. And I do want to have, hear the dissension in my brain. I'm getting better at that. So for me, with my introverted feeling, I would say it's not fully real until it's expressed in some way. I am a good journaler when I do it, but that's the disclaimer. For me, in journaling is just like, oh, really? But I had a conversation just the other day with some more personality hackers, when one person who's big into teaching people how to journal. And we kind of talked about how you can get similar benefits. So certain people will, instead of journaling, will actually do it through emailing or writing letters. You're still getting that thought and organizing it and then putting it on paper and communicating it out to someone instead of just to myself. That just seems a little more practical and useful to me. Like, for some reason, I have this blockage if it's just, dear diary, this is what I did today.
Good use of expert intuiting alternatives right there.
Yeah. And so then, or like, I'll do it with social media a little bit. It allows, I'm typing with people, but almost half of the value to me is just for me to process my thoughts and emotions and values in that. And the person is kind of ancillary. Like, it's like a bonus. Well, the bonus part is maybe they will polish up my ideas a little bit. Like, I welcome that. And that's what I don't get with journaling. Then I kind of feel like, well, what's the point? I'm not getting calibrated more. I'm just like wallowing in myself, and I don't want to do that. So you can see how like my TE is always coming and saying, no, it's got to be useful for developing and changing. And it's like FI Dom doesn't really need that to be complete, right? Like, the other thing that came up for me while you IPs were talking is that I'm always willing to reprocess. Like, you kind of talked about, it can take years to process something, and then it can seem really quick when people ask you, unless something new comes up. For me, it's like, it can be, it's almost always quick, with an instinctive held loosely thing, but I'm totally willing to reprocess because for me, the context is constantly changing. So I just was like, well, I'll add more nuance to this. No problem. So that was maybe another little slight distinction, and I'm not as direct, I think, as Brady. It's like, so I still do the things that I love to do most of the time. I can get caught up in the theoretical. A lot is probably a lot more talking, although I do a lot of hiking and all sorts of stuff. I have lots of certifications too. I'm like PADI certified. I just haven't scuba dived for like 20 years, but I used to. And it's like, okay, I did it. I'd love to do it again, but it's expensive.
Yeah.
So I snorkel now. So I like to still engage and do and take risks. But yeah, I think for me, it's not always as, I don't know, to me, it's not quite right, but I would describe it as like ESFPs are almost a little bit more directly authentic, or like this is my bias filter. It's like, well, it's always what they show you. You can kind of count on it being authentic when they are expressing. It's at least authentic in the moment. With my NE, I'm still trying to evaluate and extrapolate what's going on, and I might metagame the situation a little bit. It's like I'm constantly checking in. Okay, this isn't being received well. I'm just going to change my tack then and draw on this other part of me. That's pretty easy for me to do, and I think ESFPs do it too, but maybe not to the same degree. I think I'm weighted a little bit more.
So the way that we would do it differently, and I can speak to what my wife is like, is she's willing to put ideas out there like spaghetti on a wall and see what sticks, see what lands, see what other people, how they receive it. Whereas for me, it's like, if I'm doing something, that's how I feel about it. And it's not that any is not authentic. They are. It's just in a different way. It's in a more experimental authenticity, I guess, would be how you put it. That like, I'm authentically trying all these things out.
Right.
Whereas for me, it's very much like, I think this way, I want to do that, so I'm going to go think that way and go do that thing. You know, there's not as much of the trying out new clothes kind of thing. It's like, I see that those clothes, I want them, I'm going to get them kind of thing.
Yeah.
When Brady was saying that, I was just thinking about what Kyle was talking about in terms of the different parts of ourselves, like being in tune with that, because I think that comes from like the NFP tendency towards fantasy. And through fantasy, what you're doing is like simulating scenarios. Like, if I was to be in this scenario, how would things be? Rather than like take action. So it's like almost like a replacement for action in a way, which has its drawback because, you know, you don't actually know how things go unless you like act. But, but that's how I feel about it. It's almost like we're kind of like playing simulations in our head, perhaps.
Yeah. And it's not quite so simulations I often tie to introverted intuition because that's... it's more, so for us, it's more, what would it be like?
Right.
If I was in that situation? NI is more like simulating, okay, if this happens, then this is the most likely response, and that's going to happen. Like, so it's more linear and going up somewhere. Just wanted to throw that distinction out in case people get confused.
Makes sense. Yeah. I do find, though, the EFPs in this chat tend to be a little bit more, I'm going to try it out, and then I'm going to see how I feel about it with certain things.
Yes.
Because
oh my goodness.
The extroverted perceiving function is first. So they're always going to gather and try new things, and then they're going to see how it hits them emotionally. And then they do the Brady thing where they're like, ooh, like, that wasn't.
Oops. Guess I shouldn't have made that life-changing decision.
Yeah. I have the cringe face emoji in my head all the time. Like,
But you know, Brady, how you said, like, you were talking and you said, I get it almost makes me sound like a simpleton, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, for me, I'm not perceiving you at all that way, but I will admit for myself, like, I'm not ashamed of it, even if I am, you know, like if you're like, oh, what do you think of this? Oh, pre-processed, already know I know if I value that or not. I know exactly the emotional state that it brings up in me. I know right how I feel about it. And if anybody's like, why, I need some TI reasons here for why. I'm like, I don't need those. I feel no compulsion to give them. I like it because I like it, or I don't because I don't. And that's all I need, But, that with that strong FI also, I have no pull to go check in with anybody else, So it's like, oh, I value this thing. Well, the whole world doesn't value that thing, right? And I'm like, bummer for them because it's really cool,
Yeah.
Right.
They're missing out.
I'm sorry for you, right?
Yeah.
So,
It's true. Yeah. The SFPs who are more likely to go like, I love it just because I love it, because the SC is just like, it's more visceral. So whereas I find with the NFPs, you have a give or take with that. Some NFPs actually have very intellectual reasons because of the NE. The NE likes to kind of like write the possibilities behind it. That's where the distinction I notice is.
Well, and NE is very derivative, right? Like, so we're basing it on our pile of SI experiences. And then we're saying this is like this and this is like that. And these are connected. Like it's one step removed, whereas SE is this is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, we're not looking for sort of the metaphysical reason that exists behind the physical reality. It's just like for me, why do I like, I've been asked before, like, why do you like that song? It made my ears happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all I needed. Or why do you like that color? My eyes smile when I see that color. It's as simple as that. I don't need to, I don't need anything more than that. My favorite car is my favorite car because it's the coolest looking car, period.
Right.
Whereas we'll often build a story based on, well, this is my narrative behind it. Well, I experienced this thing with this song and it brings me back to that awesome time or whatever. And that, that may be true underlying for SFPs too, like these things, but it's not really, that's not why you like it though, if that makes sense. But and Leon, you maybe describe how that works for you, like that SI role.
Well, I think it's I experience it similarly. Like there needs to be like almost like a story behind it. Like you have to tie it together into like, you have to interweave it into this one story.
Yeah, like a movie, or like it's coming from somewhere.
Right.
Like there's this basis. So it's just a very different way of looking at it.
And another thing that I thought I wanted to comment on that was interesting, Kyle, you mentioned a minute ago something about you're willing to adjust, that FI, as needed. And I think for me, it's like I settle so deeply on how I feel about something and whether or not I value it that the adjustment usually can't come by the recommendation of another human being, unless that human being is held in extremely high esteem in my mind. I really have to feel the pain of needing to adjust, but not having been willing to, and then have it actually, stab me in the gut in a real situation at some point, and then realizing, my deep adherence to this value is causing me trouble. I should probably rethink. And then maybe I'll go consult like 2 people that I really trust. Maybe. But I'll probably just adjust on my own.
The facts for me are what matter. So like if I have a belief and then all of a sudden the facts are starting to show that isn't true anymore, I'll adjust. And that's where that SETE thing comes in for me. It's like, if something's not working and the facts are showing otherwise to what I've previously believed, it's like, well, I was wrong and it's time to move on, and that's not an easy thing to swallow, obviously. Like it hurts when that happens, but it does. I've had my opinions changed on people, or, I have a coworker who I used to not be able to stand when he was my boss. Turns out he's an amazing guy. And I just had the wrong experience with him, Right. And it's like, no, I can change as I see that the behavior is different from another perspective, but I actually have to see it. I can't just theoretically be like, oh, maybe they're different. It's like, no, I need to actually see that they are different.
Yeah. So EPs tend to have a higher level of adaptability and flexibility and just ease of changing on a pivot.
Yeah, and for me, I would say it's not so much like it almost, the way we're talking, it almost sounds like these very ultimate things. I thought this and now I thought that, or like these were my values and now they changed. For me, it's very much a constant process of refining and bringing nuance, and it can be subtle differences, or I might add a value that seems like it conflicts, but I'm comfortable holding 2 values that are contradictory if if it's the right, if it feels right, or because sometimes there just isn't, sometimes there's more going on and I don't have to have the complete picture in order to say, okay, these two things are true and I value them, even though they're completely opposite. I'm just going to find a way to work through it.
Yeah.
I can't do that. I wish I could, but I can't.
I find that my values become more gray in the intuitive or metaphysical world as I get older. And my values in the physical world become more concrete as I get older, So whatever it was, that you asked me like, what's the best chocolate chip cookie? It's like that I've got a really strong opinion on that at age 44. You know what I mean? Because I've gone out there and SE tasted all the chocolate chip cookies and I know which ones are better.
That's awesome.
But, as a young person with that third slot introverted intuition, trying to narrow down very early on like, this is what I believe about the unseen world, or, these are the patterns that I think I'm seeing behind the physical. But being relatively immature in that, I drew very strong conclusions at a young age. But then as I go through life and I SE, extroverted sensingly see the realities of the physical world, it changes and weakens. I don't want to say weaken. Weaken sounds bad, but it's more like it educates my third slot introverted intuition so that it becomes a little bit more extroverted it doesn't become extroverted intuition, but it's willing to consider more possibilities.
Open.
Once upon a time, it was unwilling to listen to.
Yeah, it's becoming more open and nuanced and sophisticated.
Yeah.
That brings me to the question. Introverted feeling is known for constantly reevaluating its identity and mulling it over and kind of going over it over and over again. So how do you all experience forming your identity? Is it ever solid or is it always flexible? Like, how does forming who you are look like? And do you ever get there?
Well, I was just thinking in terms of that. I think it was very helpful to develop expert intuition because then I started to see my identity as more like something I could experiment with to kind of like try out like what actually works for me. Because I think in the beginning I could be too seriously tied to how I think about myself. So it's like, I think it's different from how EPs do things. EPs, they kind of like jump into things and then they regret it, right? I wish I can make more regrettable decisions that way. It's more like I invest myself too strongly in one thing and then I regret that.
Yes. Very relatable.
And do you have you had a relationship with either templates or like these pathways and things that you've seen or read or learned about? It's like, this is what I need to do. And like, I'll follow this path. And then it's like, oh, wait a minute, I'm more than this. I don't know. Do you want to comment on that? Or
I think there's some like NF idealism sometimes. Like, that really resonates with me. Therefore, that is so truly me. I'm going to pursue that, right? In kind of like a fantasy kind of like way, and kind of like ignore what the reality is about the situation. Yeah, so I do run into that. It certainly helps to kind of like not take FI as seriously, get into NE and just kind of like just explore a bit, right? And yeah.
So for me, I think that like when I was a kid, I think that's a way to show it is my big thing was basketball. I grew up in Southern California, like when Magic Johnson and Kareem were, ruling the NBA, and it was such an exciting place to be. And so like every minute of my day was basketball. So it's like that's how my FI would come out. It's like, I value this. So everything I do is going to be related to that. So I would play basketball outside. And then when I was done with that, I'd come inside and I had a stuffed animal basketball league. So I had like all these like papers of stats and like brackets and stuff. And I'd play on a little koosh hoop in my bedroom or a bonus room or whatever. And then when I was done with that, I'd watch an NBA game on TV. And like, it was just this like obsessive just immersion into whatever my FI was into. And it was like SE immersion. It was like I was doing the thing rather than thinking about it.
I can really relate to that.
Fascinating.
That was all me through, the first half of my life. I played ice hockey, and it was like ice hockey posters on my walls, 1, 2, maybe 3 practices a day with a game in the night. It was all hockey all the time. If I wasn't on the ice, I was watching hockey. That's like all I did. And I think, I built my identity around that to a large degree, but then grew up, married, have kids, and then your identity changes. And I think, it's like, I could understand how someone who is very identity focused, like a professional athlete, plays a sport for, 15, 18, 20 years professionally after playing, 18 years amateurly, and then is just absolutely devastated whenever they retire because it's like that was their entire identity. For me, I found that one of the big problems I had is that when I wasn't doing kind of like what you're talking about, Brady, like building an identity around activity, when I was dormant, I would build like almost a fake identity. Like I wanted people to think that I was this, that, or the other. And life and failures have taught me that, the facade identity, in the attempt to get people to say, oh, you're so amazing, you're so great, we think you're just the best thing ever, really left an empty hole, in me. And so now, I feel like my identity now is, I don't want to say it's changing or in flux, but I'm much more open to ask myself harder questions in the daily forming of who really am I.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Jason. Like that was my path as well, as realizing, when I stopped growing, I was this tall, I'm like 5'11", 6 foot. I was this tall in 7th grade, and I just, and I was a big kid. So it was like, I could do better. And then all of a sudden high school hit and everyone grew way taller than me. And it was like, no, I'm not going to be I'm not going to be a basketball player. It was just obvious. Right. And that was hard to swallow. But yeah, you do eventually ask yourself the harder questions and be like, who am I outside of this perception of like, I'm an athlete?
Yeah.
And so that's all quite different than how I've experienced, let's say, obsessive immersion. For me, it's almost more serial obsessive immersion. So I would like whatever I did as a kid, and even now, I go all into it. Like I'll polish it up until I'm the best that I think I can get with, adequate effort. I'm not going to put in everything into it though, because there's so many other things that I either have built talents around or whatever. So I was big into sports in school. Also fairly short though. So, I was more into volleyball. I did the setter thing and, I like the strategy of that, but I was also fully into music and I was fully into drama and I was fully into math and I was fully into, it's like I couldn't limit myself because I have all these other parts. And then I would find out that all of these parts kind of connect. Like, so I love statistics in sports and the long-term strategy, player development. Like I love those aspects in addition to the actual playing. I couldn't do basketball though, because I kept on I've talked about this before, maybe, I don't know, but I kept getting fouled out for being tackled by the other people. I'm just standing there and boom. Okay. You moved your elbow or something. You moved your foot. And I'm like, no, I didn't. Like, what are you talking about? So I couldn't do basketball, but yeah. So I do recall a retreat I went on at one point for professional development. And I was trying to figure out like, who am I? What's my defining identity? And all I could come up with was like I kept on thinking, like, I keep deep diving in all of these things. Like who I am is almost whatever I do, I go all out into it. So it's like, what are all my millions of addictions? It's small A addictions, but so I can just as easily read a book all day long to the point of ignoring my body as I can doing music or having a conversation with people or playing sports, right? Like I would sacrifice my body like crazy in sports, diving and all that. Better than, some of these SE drivers because they actually felt more. I don't know. Like it's like, no, and I did. So I'd be like, oh, whatever bruises, I'll feel them the next day. And then it's like, oh man, maybe I should pay more attention to what I'm. But so that's one thing that just came up for me. It's like this obsessive immersion thing is very much an FINI loop between the two of them, whereas like NI is just like, it's going to go all the way down that rabbit hole. When it comes to, I think SI can do that with FI a little bit. We're building a story on experiences, but it's not quite the same. And the NE just has too much power to go, no, I want to spread out more. I like, let me be everything.
Like for me, I'm just like thinking about like how I express introvert feeling. I feel like I kind of, because I'm a judging function dominant person, so I kind of tend to set stricter parameters around things or kind of higher expectations. Like kind of like might have like I have especially suffered from this earlier in my life, kind of like having my identity built kind of around something and kind of like setting very strict parameters or expectations around it. It's holding myself up to that standard a lot, like, and it can be kind of overwhelming to myself. Like it's kind of like difficult to live up to. So I think that's like an FI first, and I think going into like expert intuition, that helps kind of like make me relax more. Like just to see like, no, I'm just like I'm getting caught up too much in just like one thing that I view as myself. I wanted to say though, like what Jason was talking about, in terms of what was I going to talk about? Oh, like kind of like getting, you're like really identifying with a certain way you look at yourself. I was just thinking about in Game of Thrones, like the actor Jon Snow, that I think he's an ISFP, and he got really into his role and very much emotionally connected with it, so much that after the show, he actually got depressed. Mm-hmm. He actually like kind of like lost a sense of himself after that.
Sense of his identity.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what you said, Leon, about judging your, sort of holding yourself up to an extremely high standard. That is very relatable to me. Like I had a manager for many, many years, and I thought very highly of her. And one time she said, I don't have to, basically she was saying, I don't have to, judge you or hold you accountable, because I will never hold you to as high of a standard as you hold yourself. And I just think that's a very FI dominant reality. It's like we probably create maybe too ideal of a self-image and then require ourselves to live up to that. But I think it's really important to us.
Except when it comes to things you actually don't care about.
True.
And then people are trying to force on these expectations. There's like, these don't matter. Right. I'm not going to do them.
Right. It has to be our own value. We have to value it. The fact that you value it is not going to move us much, or maybe at all. True. Or the fact that the whole dang world values it might not move us at all. But if I value it, so whatever it was, let's say it was, doing my job a certain way or whatever, it doesn't matter. If that was of a great value to me, then I was going to create for myself a standard that was way higher than anybody else's standard. And honestly, I kind of looked at everyone else and their standards that they seem to be holding themselves to as kind of pathetic. Like I would look at that and be like, don't you want to do better than that? Like, why would you allow yourself to be represented by such sub-quality performance or work,
Right.
And that might be a little bit of inferior TE also coming in there, being, a little childish, going, man, better than, I did the thing better than you did the thing.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of a baby attitude.
I so identify with that. That's like very relatable. I think like maybe ISFPs are more transparent, or like they could express that more easily. Like INFPs, it's a lot more subtle. Like we're like kind of like softer, like on the surface, but we definitely have that same like kind of thought process that goes on. Like there's that FI like very like strict standard, and actually like also like apply to others too.
Yeah.
It's kind of kept to myself a bit.
Right. Yeah. I would have never gone up to another person and said, wow, your work is really pathetic. Don't you want to do better than that? But in my head, I would be like, hey, what you're doing there is what you're producing or performing or giving to the world is a representation of who you are. don't you want to represent yourself better than that? Because what you're putting out there is insufficient, you know? And of course, the reality is I'm probably just being too big of an idealist jerk, and what they're producing is perfectly fine to get the job done.
Right. Good enough. Yeah.
One thing I would like to add to that is like FI leads to motivation. So like if there's something that we could really identify with, then there's a very strong like all-encompassing dedication and loyalty and devotion to that.
Yeah.
But then like with everything else, there's like this extreme like apathy.
Yeah.
It's like I can't even lift a finger.
That's like Kyle, you said earlier, something to the effect of, well, I may not like it or I may not feel like it, but I got to get this thing done. For me, intellectually, I know that's true, that I should live that way. But I am very much I don't like it or I don't feel like it. So I guess it's just not going to get done. And that's really burned. The only thing that has changed me about that, to the degree that it has like 2% in my life, is that I've gotten my rear end kicked pretty bad on that a number of times, you know. But it's really like the hardest thing in the world to do the thing, you know, actually go out and do the thing if I don't value it or I don't feel like it.
That's a huge difference between the introverted and extroverted version of the SFP, Jason, because for me, I'm just like, I just do things and then I think about it later. So it's, you know, like, I know I have to do it, therefore I'll do it. The problem I run into is that inferior NI, where I'm not even really thinking about the ultimate course of action or the future implications of it. So I'm like, oh, I need to do this now, so I'm going to do it now. And then think like, oh, if I would have just waited a few days, I would have had a better plan and I would have taken care of details better. So I get like obsessed with the in the moment, getting it done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another scenario to kind of illustrate the ESFP and ISFP difference is, let's say you have an ESFP and they're like, yeah, you know what? We're going to include these people into our friend group. Yeah, come on in. And that person totally just wrecks up your friend group. And you're like, I did not, and I think about that person. Such a ruckus.
It's kind of like different. Maybe Jason relates to this. I'm talking about from my own experience. Is that especially earlier in my life? Is that there's a lot of you create a lot of barriers with everybody else, and there's like this high degree of selectivity. They have to kind of like jump through a lot of hoops. But once they jump through the hoops, you think, oh, they're through the hoops now. I can be their friend, and then they may not be interested in being your friend, right? It's like, but you're able to jump through all the hoops. So it's like kind of like the opposite issue.
Yeah, definitely went through life with an extremely limited sphere of acquaintances.
Whereas it's very often for ESFPs to have an inclusive mentality. So what will happen is they'll include a lot of people and then they'll go like, oh, that was a dumpster fire. Oh, well.
Yeah. I was always the kid who I'd bring in like the new people. I was the new kid collector and would bring them into the group. And what happened to me in high school was there was like a group of 4 of us, and I just stopped being able to fit in with them. And the 3 of the group were ones I brought into the group, you know? And after a while, it's just like, man, I don't actually really gel with these guys anymore. It was kind of funny how that turned out.
That's so weird. Mm-hmm. I can't relate to that at all. I don't get people into groups. I don't know. It's hard. Mm-hmm. But that's also being NDOM, right? Like that's a little trickier.
Yeah.
People get confused when I talk too much, especially as a kid. Don't feel like I fit in.
Yeah, and that's another point Kyle mentioned, whereas ENFPs are more likely to lose people in conversation. So they'll say ideas that other people are like, how did you get from A to Z to B to H to Z? And so NE dominant talk can be like, they can lose people more easily because they're jumping from so many ideas.
Yeah.
Whereas if you hear someone with SE and I talk, like an ESFP or an ISFP, you can follow that stream very easily and well. It's like very straightforward and it's clear. So speech pattern is different between the types too.
Something that happens with the SE and I talk though is that we leave things out because we don't think they're useful, but then we don't feel heard based on the response because it's like we didn't give all the nuance when we were speaking. So it's like someone will respond and I'm like, yeah, but I meant all these other things too. I just didn't want to lose you. You know, it's kind of that could be a bit of a problem sometimes.
I wonder too if sometimes with an SE Dom, it's like this viewpoint is self-apparent, so I don't need to give all of these other things because like, I don't know. I have one SE Dom friend, and sometimes he'll just type something in our group chat, and we have zero context. He knows exactly what he's talking about, and it's not like it's complex. It's just He's like, "Oh, what do you think about this?" And then he doesn't post anything else, and we're like, I mean, that's really extreme, but
no, but you know, it's just something that that Michael Pierce says. I don't know if you guys watch Michael Pierce's videos, or read his books, but that's something he says that with the SENI axis, it's like, anyone with eyes can see it, is kind of if they would choose to look. I think it's something along those lines is what he said. And that kind of is our viewpoint. It's like, well, it's obvious. Look around us, you know, like it's right here. And it's a very like SENI, and I don't want to say it's an arrogance, but it's like it's kind of like a, well, duh kind of perspective. And I'm finding more and more as I get older, that's like, no, that's not how everyone else sees the world. They're not all scanning the world like I do. You know, and then I realized there was obvious things that I was missing that weren't the visual things you could see, that were like, you know, the ideas and the planning and stuff like that. So
yeah, or just that require a secondary perspective, or
I think another, I'll say, weakness of extroverted sensing communication is I always think of extroverted sensing as a highlight reel. It's like watching Sports Center. You don't get to see the whole game. You just get to see the moments that were significant. And when you interact with somebody who's like a lead SI or has SI as their second function, I think they're much more able to take you through the sensory moment by moment, step by step. I mean, I feel like it's high SI people that are great at writing instruction manuals. You know what I mean? Or taking you through okay, do step 1, then step 2, then step 3, then step 4. I find like if I've been out for the day and I get home, you know, and my wife's like, well, how was your day? Right? Like I'll remember something that happened at 3 p.m. and be like, oh, this happened. And then I'll remember something that happened at 9 a.m. Oh yeah, and this other thing happened. Let me tell you about that, you know, and then something that happened at 3:45. Oh, and let me tell you about that. It's just a highlight reel, and I'm just going through the highlights. But like to actually go step by step by step is not so easy.
And there can be a lot of valuable data by putting it into context and having a narrative behind it. Like suddenly it's like, oh, this data makes sense because you did this and this and this, and now you got to this point. No wonder you were freaking out, or no wonder you're like a mess now, right? That you're home.
And I actually find myself saying things like I don't know, let's say I saw a car wreck, right? And I'll be like, oh, I mean, there was this car. Okay, let me back up. I was driving down Highway A, you know, right in front of, right in front of, you know, Panera. And then, because I'll just want to go right to the highlight and not sometimes not set it up. Although I don't think I'm as bad about that anymore because I've learned, hey, you got to set it up for it to make any sense, you know?
Yeah. I noticed that the ENFP and the INFP will do more setting up the stage, or NE. If you have a lot of NE, it's going to set up the stage, whereas the SE is just going to want to go straight to the point and cut through the noise.
Yeah.
And so you'll see this in everyday conversation with them. Let's say, for example, you ask them the question, how are you like as a child? An SE high up person, like an ESFP, will answer, oh, you know what? They'll give you the straightforward, give you a summary of how it would be like to see them as a kid. You know, I was a good kid, or like they'll say I was a bad kid. But it'll give you this full image of, okay, you know, what is the gist of the information you need to take out of this? Whereas if you ask like an ENFP a comparable question with NE at the very top, they're going to set the stage everywhere before they...
5 hours later. Well, part of it, though, I think is because like a lot of that data is SI data, right? Yeah. And even how it fits, how it progresses, that there's a bit of details thinking. It's really hard to know where to start and how much background and context to give, that I think people with SI a little higher up have a bit easier time knowing where to set the limit, because to my NE, everything is connected and everything applies, even if it's just a little bit. Whereas people with higher SI can just like, well, this is the direct pathway to it a little bit more than me. I don't know. Or so like they don't care about all of the patterns, just the biggest patterns. Right. So that's where a lot of that's coming from.
Yeah, that's a good point. Oh, BRB. Okay.
I need to get some water too.
Okay, let's have a break.
It's fascinating though, because I kind of needed a bio break too, but would I listen or pay attention? No, not a chance. It wasn't even on my radar. It's like, oh, wait a minute. I really should go to the bathroom now. Yeah, that's a thing.
I know. I had to, I'm at work right now, hence the decoration. And I had to be like, I was like, oh crap, it's been over an hour. I should probably pretend like I'm still working and log back on. So.
Well,
so your workplace doesn't know that you're doing this or what?
No.
That's hilarious. See, I would never ever do that. There's another difference between ESFP and ENFP.
There's a variety of factors there too, though. I mean, I work for the federal government. I've been doing it for 12 years now. So it's just like, meh.
True. Know? Context matters.
That's true. Yeah. It's also true that ESFPs do certain things that they can get away with that ENFPs would not do. Like with driving, a lot of SE DOMs may be a little bit more bold with the multitasking while driving.
Yeah. Following driving rules for me, it totally depends. Like, you know, obviously I'm not going to blow through a red light, but if it's a stop sign, I'll do what they call the California roll, you know, where you kind of roll up to the stop sign and go, you know, like.
This is all getting cut out, right? This is all getting cut out, Joyce? I'll share a story if it's getting cut out.
Wait. Yeah, let's not go down the whole. So I'm gonna.
Hey, Joyce did not answer that question. She's doing are you doing an expose on us?
No.
Yeah.
Let me know if there's anything you want cut out, and I'll take it out. But yes, let's go back on topic because.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so. Speech style. There is a difference between speech style. Do they need to talk around something to get to the point, which is more ENFP, or do they just go like straight shooter, giving you the most relevant information, which is more SP, like ESFP or ISFP? So some of the other themes that we noticed throughout this conversation too were that with the NI in the ESFP and ISFP, they can put all their eggs into one basket if they find that FI thing. Whereas for a lot of NE users, like an ENFP especially, they're more serial monogamous with high frequency. And so they're going to be more dabblers, dilettantes. I said that word wrong.
Dilettante.
You know, Joyce, it's really interesting because I've noticed that in my life, the people who are high SE users have really struggled during COVID with isolation. I think a lot of that is that if you have like weak NI, you're like, this is going to be forever. I'm trapped. This is never ending. There's no hope. You know, not that I'm experiencing that, of course, but, you know, it's that has been a struggle. You know, and actually, dear Kristen's talked about it on her channel, you know, and I could really relate to what she's going through. It's that weak NI. It's like, you know, you put all your eggs in this basket of how you like to live your life. And then when you can't do that anymore, it's like, but, you know, like you kind of have a freak out.
Yeah. And it's also, if it's not happening now, it doesn't seem like it's ever going to happen. For instance, with certain things, me and Brady, we're writing a book right now. And the thing is, we can go through it a little bit slowly because of me. I want it to be like just chef's kiss, perfect. And so Brady's like, all right, so this is going to take forever. Or like you broke, or you were like, I don't see the end.
Right. and to be clear, it's good that Joyce is doing what she's doing with it. It's just like, sometimes I need assurances of like, so we are going to be doing, you know, this is going to eventually move on to the next step, you know?
Yeah. And I find that to be very SE Dom because it's like, if it's not right now, it doesn't feel real. So the further down you push it, it feels even more not real. Like if I will give them an event like 3 months down the line and I'm like, yeah, sure, let's meet down the line. And they're like, that's a really long time. 3 months might be a short amount of time, but like what I'm trying to illustrate is whenever I push an event down and they're like, I'm going to see you in the future, is what I'll say to SE DOMs. And they're like, so that means never. And I'm like, no, that does not mean never.
It feels that way though.
I feel like I have the opposite problem as what Brady said. Like I think my problem is like if something was to get in the way of what I want to do, I could put it too much into perspective. Because the problem with putting it too much into perspective is that you don't like actively pursue it because you think, oh, there's always time for it somewhere down the line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that.
You know, the whole pandemic thing, the way like you know, you were talking like as an SE Dom or, you know, for SE Doms, it might be like, oh, this feels like it's going to go forever, right? For me, I think with having the SE and I in the middle, I'm like, yeah, you know, there will probably be some people who work hard to drag this on further than it needs to. There will be some people who try to, you know, like wrap it up faster than it needs to, whatever. The great thing as, you know, FI, I don't want other people messing with my values and emotions. Like the great thing is I can go places now and maybe I won't actually have to meet other people or interact with other people. Like I can FI in the park by myself and there might not be anybody else there. Like this is amazing. You know, now I'm not saying the pandemic is amazing. That's not what I'm saying.
No, I know.
I'm just saying like, I'm, you know, very, yeah, whatever, it'll do this or it'll do that. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Whatever will happen. I'll figure it out when that time comes. But I'm much more focused on the, like, what does this mean for my, you know, personal processing time without constantly being bombarded by, you know, other people. In fact, there's a little bit of it that's kind of like, hey, there's like now a built-in excuse for people to not be able to like bother me or interact with me. This is, you know, and I'm not promoting that as like, you should think great of me because I say that, but I'm just trying to be honest for the video.
No, it's my INFP brother says the same thing. He's been really enjoying it because it's given him the chance to do more of his art and more of his, you know, more of his hobbies, and, you know, he's thriving on it and I am not.
Less TE expectations put on top of you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
It's like, oh, now I have an excuse now. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, I kind of like when I think about benefits of the pandemic, like I'm gravitating more towards, they are improving these online systems. And so now I can do these things more efficiently. And like, there's a lot of, institutional focus, or it's like, oh, our healthcare system is now showing how broken it was before, and the governments aren't doing anything to address it. They're putting it all, they're building these straw men and putting blame on certain segments of the population. I'm like, that's not the problem. The problem is you didn't fund your healthcare system in Canada anyways. And it's so frustrating. So I see these benefits and I see these negatives, but it's almost like not really about me so much. I can always just find a way. Like, I actually have liked interacting online with people more because people didn't used to be very comfortable with that. And I always thought, I liked seeing people in person better. But now I actually see more people, which is really cool because I've been craving that because I see people's busy lives and all that. I don't want to be inconvenience to others. But now it's like, well, if you refuse to see me online, then I know you actually don't want to see me, right? Like, because it's as inconvenient as it possibly can. So it just clears some things up, right?
Yeah. And I can see that, you know, I really can. Like, that's something that as time's gone on, I've been made more aware of this. Like, the facts have changed. Like I mentioned that earlier. It's like, I am having more of these kinds of moments. You know, getting into the typology community helped with that for me. But, you know, I played Dungeons and Dragons and my group became virtual and that was good. You know, like, and I have some friend groups I meet up with on Zoom calls from time to time. It's just not the same for me. You know, it's going out and bantering.
There is some differences still.
Turn more and
Yeah.
The energy is different for sure. When Jason was talking about how he loves the pandemic because there are less interruptions, I'm just imagining an ESFP at the workplace going like, hey, Bob, what are you doing right now? They're like, the ESFP is the interruptor. It's like,
oh, totally.
Can I have fun?
So what I hear you saying is you don't see as many ESFPs on the street.
No. You know, honestly, the ESFPs are great because they just want to do stuff. It's
Right.
sometimes it's the people that want to connect, like crack through that. You know, Leon, you were talking earlier about like the barriers you put up. It's like, if you want it, like an ESFP is like perfect for me because it's like, oh, you just want to go out and explore the physical world together. Cool. You know what I mean? Like you're not going to try to move my emotions. I'm not going to try to move your emotions. I can value what I value. You value what you value, and we're good. Let's just go, you know, play hockey together. Let's go, you know, play basketball together. Let's go hike together. You know what I mean? And it's like I love this thing, and you I love this thing, and we can I love this thing in proximity to one another, and that's fun. I'll do that all day long.
Yeah.
But it's when you know, again, I'm not passing judgment on any type or any cognitive function, but it's when you FE try to pull my emotions or my values into your emotions and values and sort of commingle them, that I'm like, we're done. You know what I mean? Like I can't go there with you. I can SE with you all day long. That's awesome. But my FI's got to be over here by itself, and, you know, keep your values and emotions over there.
Yeah, it's why I love actually like these kinds of conversations with other authenticity people. I could have used a lot more of in high school. I would have felt like I fit in a lot more. It's exactly that point, is all of us with our authenticity, we're not like putting expectations on each other at all. It's like everyone's just showing up. You can show up how you show up, and that's fine, right? It doesn't affect me. My INFJ friend likes hanging out with a bunch. There's an ENFP, an INFP, and an ISFP in the past. Less so now recently with COVID and, you know, hunkering down the fort with his family. But the INFJ actually really likes hanging out with us authenticity users because we never actually put that on him either. Like, he's so used to having people, he's so keyed in with what everybody's experiencing in the moment, and he knows that none of us are like judging him. Like, we don't really care what he thinks or feels. It's like we're not putting these should statements on him, and he's just like, oh, a break, because he's so aware of what everybody's expectations are all constantly. To be in a group where there aren't any expectations of him performing other than just showing up and, you know, being there with us and listening and not judging us. I think he like he said, he's found that super refreshing and awesome to be around us. And yeah, I like that too. I'd like it. So it's both TE and FE kind of put these things on authenticity users, and we kind of like, hey, not all the time, you know.
Well, but you know, first of all, FE people are awesome. You are all awesome FE people. But you know, when I go back to like my very judgmental mindset that I talked about earlier in a workplace environment, you know, that's where that TE, especially that little inferior baby TE, is just like, hey, you're not doing the thing good enough. You know what I mean? And it's like, I don't want anybody FE moving my emotions or values or even trying. But, you know, in a kind of a tantrumy state, I'm not afraid to be like, hey, I don't like the way you're doing that thing. You know, you don't do the work right. You're, you know, blah, blah, blah. Although I might not say it, I'm thinking it. And so, you know, it's really hypocritical to be like, hey, all you FE people, don't try to connect with me emotionally. Right. But I'm not afraid to TE, you know, inferior judge you because you don't do the job.
Well, and I think a part of it is, now that I know what's going on too, is that legitimately this is a valuable thing for them. Is like, okay, do we all believe or feel the same thing? That's valuable for them in their decision making, and consensus is so valuable for them. And I recognize that. I still, even with knowing that, part of it is like, I don't want to, because I know as an ENFP how malleable my FI can be, or like, because what I say in the moment, I might not actually, it might have come out wrong. And as I say it, it's like, oh, I have to adjust it. And if someone's going to now take everything and absorb it forever, it's kind of like, I don't want that responsibility. Like, hey, hold on a minute. Like, now I have to be very careful of my words. There's all of this extra stuff going on, and I have to be careful about what I say, which I should anyways to a degree. But for me, if I'm in that space, it kind of really suppresses my FI, and then it's not good for anyone. So I have to manage, like, recognizing that there's a responsibility I now have that isn't the case when I'm with you guys, for example. I could say whatever I want and it's not going to destroy your lives, right? Like, it's totally irrelevant, right? Like, cause it's just, you're sovereign. It can brush off, but I could give other types messaging that can impact them deeply. Now, I can do it for the good too. I can be very inspiring and positive, and that's what I do with my coaching. I can really leverage those parts where I'm giving these messages that people, that are very valuable for people to hear. But if it's casual, or if I don't know exactly what the expectations are, or if I know I'm messing up socially and I don't know how or why, that's really unstable, unsettling place for me to be in. That make any sense at all? Just any blasted all over just to show.
That's the example of the ENFP speech pattern that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, Kyle, I call these the NESI monologues.
Yeah.
You know, my wife will do that, and it's like, hey, I just asked you what you wanted for dinner. I don't know how we got on this.
Yeah.
You know?
But I'm kind of unpacking, and I didn't have a clue where exactly I was going. I had an idea, and I felt like I at least kept that thread of trying to describe a really tricky reality that's abstract, and like these aren't tangible things. It's not the boy walked to the post office and got some mail kind of thing, right? Like, yeah. I'm talking about interpersonal dynamics, like, yikes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's another differentiation between the speech styles. So with NE, you don't really know exactly what you're going to say until you say it. So it becomes clearer the more you're talking it out loud. You're like, oh, that was my point. I'm starting to form my point as I'm speaking with someone.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Whereas with NISE, you come in with a conclusion in mind, and you're just trying to figure out how to most clearly take out all the details to communicate it in a way that just conveys the highlights.
And I think that greatly, like, changes what FI looks like to each type too, you know, because like for the SFPs, it's like the FI is a little bit more clear. Yeah. It's like, I am FIing you right now. You know, it's like, this is my FI. Whereas like NFP, ENFP, it's a little bit more cryptic, not in a bad way. It's just more like, it just is a little bit more complicated, a little bit more tied into more things. So it's harder to succinctly just be like, here's my FI.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And for me, what's happening, because I need to deal with my FI in exterior ways, like with my NE, I need to kind of get it outside first, and now I can deal with it. So as I'm talking, my FI is like, okay, these words, yeah, that's good. That's good. Wait, something isn't quite right here. I need to give me a clarification, give me a nuance. And so that, but I have to do that like real time or live, which is why I do like writing. I just don't do it enough. But then I can, like, if I'm typing, I can review it. It's like, oh, okay. After I've written 4 paragraphs, I can take my last, okay, this is where I ended up. Now I can cut out these unnecessary things that I was saying. I just can't do that in conversation. So I'm a little self-conscious about that because I lose people along the way, right?
Yeah, and it does show through writing what Kyle said. So I have a typing service, and typically like people fill out these questionnaires, and you can tell if an ENFP filled out the questionnaire because it's so much writing.
Every essay, is a question, right?
Needs to make sure it's getting all the conceptual nuance and complexity. The FI doesn't want to misrepresent itself, so it just becomes this whole essay. I'm like, ooh, that NEFI essay.
So that's always funny to me because you'll see on Reddit or on YouTube, people will be like, am I an INFJ or an INFP? And it's like, if there's like 3 paragraphs of writing, I'm like, you're an INFP. You know, you're not an INFJ, you know, like, because you wouldn't be writing that much if you were an NI user. You'd be like much more like succinct and, you know, anyways, I always just think that's funny. I mean, it's obviously that's not how actual typing works, right. But it's just like a little joke I have in my head about it.
But these are little clues though that help along the way.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I do that too. So like in terms of writing, I always have to like go back and edit. Like this was not that relevant. This is marginally relevant, but I should really try to cut that out, even though I don't want to.
Yeah.
Right. And but I did want to comment because because Jason was talking about extrovert feeling earlier, and I was thinking about like, I remember an INTP was describing to me about having no sense of self. And I was like, my mind was like blown. It's like, how is that even possible? Like, you don't have a sense of self. And I even found that to be like kind of creepy in a way. But then
well, it's your driver, right? Like that's the protagonist of your life. If you come into a challenge, well, who am I? How, like, that's gonna solve the problem for me if I know who I am.
Yeah. At the same time, I thought like, wow, what a relief. Not a sense of self that you're worried about all the time, and wondering if you're congruent with it.
Leon, Joyce, we did a call a while back that was ISFPs and ESFPs, right? And Brady, I don't remember if it was you or if it was Kristen that said it. It said something about the idea of like what you said earlier about just sort of doing, and then that kind of tells you your identity, or you're not, you're not sitting around all the time like just brooding over who am I, And I remember hearing that and thinking that's got to be so freeing. I mean, for you it may not feel freeing because it's all you've ever known. It's the only experience you've had. But like to hear it and intellectually think through that, I'm like, I would love to be able to do that for a day or two. And who knows, I might get addicted to it and say, no, this is what I want to do the rest of my life if I could. Not that I can change that brain wiring, but there is a burden and almost a bogging down of the ability to go through life. It's almost like walking through mud when everything you ever say or do, you have to sort of pre-analyze and figure out how to package it properly to stay consistent with who you are. It really slows down the ability to move. Even for SE, right? Even having SE second, right? Which is going to be more of a doing thing maybe than a theoretical, imagining or thinking thing. Even there, it still holds me back and keeps me from moving on a lot of things that I'd like to move on.
Yeah, I remember that conversation, and I don't remember if it was Kristen or I, but we both agreed and both, agreed that we both do that. The thing is that just doing things comes with its own consequences, like who knows right now, there could be a boss right outside this door being like, hey, why aren't you working?
And that's why you've learned to talk yourself out of situations because you've been forced to.
Yeah. Right. I can charm my way through it.
Yeah. It's just like, oh, hey.
I'm just on my 15-minute break right now and I'm talking to a friend,
Right.
That's interesting. You mentioned about like this need to do. Like I think like if an INFP is like very unhealthy, then like we could kind of completely derive our sense of self just by writing like a poem about it, or like just a series of poems about it without like engaging in anything that's real in outer world. And it could be like a complete fantasy too, because it's more like an ideal of like who you are, but not like, I think you'd only like really discover who you are by actually like kind of like testing it out in some sort of way, in a very tangible way.
And so by finding the boundaries of it too, right? Like, so the SI in an INFP is kind of this world of comfortable ruts that feel so good, or habits, and it's like, but I know I like this already. Mm-hmm. And Annie's job is to
it a million times.
Yeah, and so Annie's job is very optimistic. It's gaining more territory and finding the edges of things. So the metaphor I used in my recent personality hacker interview was about Annie throwing paint at a three-dimensional statue in the room, and I don't want to just hit the center and get to the heart of it like NI does. I want to miss. I want to find the edges, because then I get the full definition. If I always hit to the middle, I don't really know what it's truly all about, and I want all of the well, in the end, I'm actually kind of looking for the detail. Like, it's that aspirational inferior function thing too. I want all of the detail and data, but I do that by experimenting and tossing and missing, being wrong a whole lot. But there's this optimism in it that no matter what I do, I'm always actually, for me, it's helping me find out what my FI and who I am. So my my previous business that seemed good, like we learned so much about, okay, my wife and I can work together, but these are the limitations of where we can't work together, or where this puts actually her in a really rough spot. Dealing with a lot of employees is just not going to be healthy. And so if I want my value of working together with my wife, we're going to have to not do that. And that's super valuable. So even though we are not running that business anymore, it's super valuable experience. So some people say, well, you're not doing it anymore. That's a failure, right? Because you're not doing this one thing for the rest of your life. And I'm like, no, like now that FI and her TI is getting more and more polished, but it's a really wasteful process, right? Like,
I think
it's not comfortable.
I think for all of us too in this group as FPs, that's probably a common thread, is this thought of like, if something doesn't work out for the rest of your life, that's cool, because we've got the SE and NE higher up. So it's like, part of the whole process of forming your identity is trying things.
Yes.
That's going to be a really important part for all four of us. It's like, we got to go out there and try things, whether it's ideas or whether it's going out in the physical world and trying things. Right. It's like, if that's how it happens for us. So I doubt most of us will have one career for the rest of our lives. And,
Well, INFPs can come pretty close.
True with that FISI. That true.
SI thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's true.
Well, the introverts in general might also have an easier time with that because of they're less new and gathering seeking
that's true.
The ESFPs will be.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the ESFPs and the ENFPs who try a lot of things. They're out there.
Yeah.
I think we failed more than anyone else.
That's true. I think it's really true. And I actually, it's funny. To my daughter about this, she's an ENTP, and it's like, I always say to her, it's like, if you never try, you'll never find out. That's kind of like a life motto of mine. It's like, just try. It's okay if it doesn't work out. You can just laugh it off and try something else. It's okay.
Yeah. But you've gleaned stuff along the way, right? And it's never going to go to waste.
Right.
Yeah. So you'll find that ENFPs or ESFPs or just EPs in general, they have a really high level of openness. So on the big five, they actually score really high in openness typically. And so there's a stereotype where they link intuition to openness, whereas I would caution away from that.
It's extroverted perceiving, actually. It's extroverted perceiving.
I think so. That's my second highest on my big five is openness.
Yeah,
I think though some of us who are stuck a little bit introvertedly sometimes look at, like, say, an EP's willingness to go out and, explore and see that in somewhat of an envious way. I mean, I worked for the same company for 17 years, but there really wasn't a week or maybe even a day that I didn't want to leave. It's like I did leave after 17 years, but it did take the prompting of a few people that really mattered to me saying, look, this thing is beating you down. You know what I mean? You need to move. And I wanted very badly to just, EP go, okay, I'm done with this. I'm going to go move on to something else. But it was really fear, that prevented me. I wanted to very badly, but it took me a long time to do it.
Yeah.
But your NI is seeing all of these implications of, that means I'm going to be without income for a while, maybe. Right. And that means this is going to look like this on my resume, or there's all of these myriad things. Right. And then being at tertiary, it can get a little out of hand too.
Well, yeah, I think having third slot NI, it's kind of like, it can be very naive to a good way, or it can be uninformed to a bad way, just a little bit. And what I mean by that is, like, I can either a lot of times think, oh, this is going to be the most amazing thing ever. It's going to be great. And not necessarily like really analyze, okay, maybe you're getting your hopes up a little bit too much that it's going to be amazing. Maybe it won't be quite as amazing as you think. Or on the flip side of that, I can be it'll end the world. Everything's going to go bad if this thing happens. And it's like, yeah, that's probably not quite accurate either. I mean, I feel like I'm relatively balanced in that area, but I can fall into those moments where I go to these sort of extremes of it's going to be amazing or it's going to be terrible. And sometimes that prevents me from moving, especially if I'm like, it's going to be terrible.
Yeah, especially because every action you do is reflective of your identity. So you want to be congruent. And so that'll cause some risk aversion too.
Absolutely.
Cool. And so this chat is lovely, amazing, and all things wonderful. I really enjoyed talking. I know with NE, if we just continue on, it'll go on.
I just had an idea of what to talk about.
Oh no! And
So many more things.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is really nice. It was a pleasure to see the authentic cores of the FP types here. And thanks, Leon, for always coming on and representing the INFPs. And on feisty days, you represent the ESFP females, but nonetheless, you are a wonderful representative.
Is there something I don't know about?
Leon likes to do opposite day because his NE gets playful and he just
Nice.
puts on these hats. And so, yeah, check out TypeTips.
It's a channel about ticks, like all different varieties of ticks that you can encounter in the wilderness.
It's a good one. And so, thanks, Jason, for heading out here and giving your ISFP take. There's this visceralness to how you experience the world, and it is really great to hear the amount of conviction you can feel too behind your beliefs. Knowing the best chocolate chip cookie, I will ask Jason. And so he has a great YouTube channel. It's called Jason Oshia. Go
Or
check
my ISFP journey.
Oh, you changed it. Okay, cool. My ISFP journey. Yes.
But I don't know how it comes up, but that's what it's supposed to be. So I might have to check that out if it's coming up by my name.
Cool.
Yeah, I've seen it as both. I'm not sure which it is right now.
Okay.
Yeah. And Kyle, thanks for appearing on the YouTubes. And he has many different hobbies and interests. He's the polymath of polymaths. And go check out his website, the
Friesenwellness.com. Yeah.
Yeah.
Friesen.
Yay.
Like on my name right there.
Yes. Well, yep. Mm-hmm. If it wasn't sensory clear enough, we will have just a bunch of neon signs. And Brady, thanks for being so playful and fun to write a book with. Typically, it's really boring and dry to write things, but you make group endeavors fun. So thank you. You bring the jazz hands to it.
Oh, totally. I love the jazz hands.
Yeah. So thank you. And so I appreciate audience members for watching. I'll see you all in the next episode. Take care.
Thank you.